Title: They heard screams in the woods, then someone knocked back. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. The walk that never ended. He left his townhome at 2:07 a.m., hoodie up, keys turning twice on the deadbolt out of habit. The street carried that washed-out sodium glow that makes everything feel older than it is. Mailboxes, cracked sidewalks, the thin sound of distant highway hiss. He told himself it was only a walk to clear his head after another late shift. 10 minutes. 15 maybe. But past the last familiar cul-de-sac, past the last porch light, the neighborhood seemed to unspool into someplace the city forgot to map. Houses grew farther apart. The street got narrower. Where the asphalt buckled, weeds stitched through the seams like veins. The air turned colder and heavier, the kind of cold that sits in the lungs. On one side, a line of black trees. On the other, a run of houses with drawn blinds and fences leaning like tired men. He glanced at his phone. No service bars, just a small, stubborn, searching, under the carrier name. It irritated him more than it scared him. He kept walking. The first scream arrived like a rock thrown at a still pond. A single, hard syllable, the shape of a word without the word itself, flung into the trees and then multiplied by them, echoed back on itself so precisely he could not tell where it began. He stopped mid-step. The night went vacuum quiet again. No insects, no animals. Even the highway dissolved. The scream had been a man's voice, but not pleading. It sounded like somebody trying to make someone else look up. He listened for a full 30 seconds, counting breaths, then forced himself forward. 2 streetlights ahead were dimming in an alternating rhythm, as if wired to a slow heartbeat. The houses here were wrong. High windows with no curtains, a porch swing moving a fraction without wind, a plastic tricycle bleached white by weather. He looked at it and felt a pressure behind his eyes the way you feel when you stare at a too bright screen. That's when the second scream came. Closer, lower, behind him. He spun around. In the amber wash, the road he had walked had narrowed to a slit of light. At its far end, a figure stood, nothing but shoulders and a head, a dark coat falling to the knees, no details, as if the streetlight refused to show more. The figure took 2 steps toward him and stopped. The man blinked, and the figure wasn't there. He didn't run. Not yet. He picked a pace he could sustain, quick but measured, arms tucked close, breath steady, the way you move when you're being watched but do not want to confirm it. He passed a mailbox with a name plate scratched to metal. He passed a bus stop glass cube spiderwebbed with cracks and a taped notice so water-warped it was unreadable. Twice he looked back and saw nothing. 3 blocks later, familiar houses began again. SUVs in driveways, a string of paper lanterns, a lawn flamingo knocked on its side by last week's wind. The relief carried him up his own front steps. He slit the chain, engaged the deadbolt, turned the bottom lock. He poured water and drank it too fast. The shock of cold hit his stomach like stone. Still standing in the dim kitchen, he heard a shuffling outside on the doormat, rubber scraping concrete, an uncertain foot adjusting its weight. Then a knock. Not the bright, rhythmic kind a neighbor uses. A heavy knuckle, a slow interval, as if measuring the thickness of the wood. He held his breath and pressed an eye to the peephole. Only black. He flipped off the kitchen light, waited for the pupils to widen, put his ear to the seam. Nothing. He recorded a short video with the screen brightness as low as it would go, angling the lens toward the door glass. The recording showed what his eye could not. The silhouette of a man a half step back from the door, chin tilted down, wearing dark clothes that had no texture at all, like fabric without seams. He felt his scalp tighten. He whispered to the 911 dispatcher who answered. 5 knocks came while he spoke. Then no more. When police arrived, there were only wet shoe prints on the steps, thin ovals dissolving into the night air. He rewatched the video. The timestamp read 2:43 a.m. He went to bed at dawn and slept badly, waking to the echo of a voice that hadn't sounded afraid, but wanted him to look up. Over the next 10 nights, the knocks returned at impossible hours. By the time he got to the door, the steps were empty. He told no one. He told himself it was stress. But he stopped walking at night. The ride that shouldn't exist. Patrick drove nights because the quiet put distance between him and everything else. The town center, bars, the late closing pharmacy, a 24-hour diner with a flickering was good for short fares, but by 1:40 a.m. the app's map thinned to a scatter of requests. When the ping came, it was a location he didn't recognize, a state-maintained road beyond the last subdivision, right where the city's street grid gives up. He accepted without thinking. The app clock matters more than intuition when you're trying to cover rent. 10 minutes later, his headlights swept a straight ribbon of asphalt flanked by black, rain-damp trees. He eased onto the shoulder at the dot on the map. No house lights. No mailbox numbers. No tail lights in the distance. He texted, "Arrived." Hazard lights on. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Nothing. After 5 minutes, he canceled, the small penalty stabbing his nightly total. He pulled away, and the second ping came from a mile deeper in. Same road. Same blankness behind the pin. He told himself it was a glitch, a bad GPS bounce, a low signal relocating the pickup. He turned around anyway. The meter doesn't care how a night feels. A man waited at the second pin, hood up, gray sweatshirt, duffel strap across the chest. Patrick let the doors unlock. The man slid into the back seat, saying nothing, the smell of wet fabric and metal filling the car. The drop-off address the app had set was 5 minutes further down the empty road. No lights there either. The silence grew taut and wire-thin. Patrick cleared his throat. "You from around here? Can we not talk?" the man said, voice neutral but flattened, like a recording played through a wall. Patrick nodded to the mirror. The man's gaze was already anchored there, meeting Patrick's eyes with the stillness of a photograph. Twice, Patrick glanced away because it felt rude to hold it. 3 times because it felt like drowning to keep it. They rolled to a stop at the drop-off pin. No driveway, no gate, just the suggestion of a path where ditch grass lay pressed in a narrow line. Patrick tapped, "End ride." That's when the cold shape touched his neck. Not the muzzle as much as the idea of it. Heavy, small, absolute. The man didn't raise his voice. "Leave the keys." "Out of the car." Patrick obeyed because there was no alternate timeline where he didn't. He stepped into air that smelled like wet bark and old iron. The man stayed a few paces back. The duffel settled against his shoulder, the gun in his hand not trembling at all. They walked into the trees. After 10 minutes, Patrick's calves burned. After 11, his sense of direction dissolved. He tried to string words together. He had cash, he had a kid, a lie. Take the car, take the phone. The man said nothing. "Stop," the man said at last. Patrick stopped. The cold climbed his back. He pictured headlines that never used names. He pictured a mother he hadn't called in months. The man's breath made no fog. That's when something snapped, a vapor-thin thread that held Patrick to stillness. He ran. He didn't choose a direction. He chose motion and committed to it, shoulders low, hands free to swat branches. A voice behind him said, "Stop," again, closer, and then a single shot tore the night open. It rang in 3 directions, bounced from trunks, broke into smaller noises. Patrick did not fall. He ran until running became walking and walking became a controlled stagger. He did not look back because looking back makes you a target even if no one's there. He found a narrow lane, then the faint glow of a kitchen window, then the astonished face of a man who did not want to open his door and did anyway. When the sheriff's cruiser reached him an hour later, Patrick was shivering in a blanket that smelled like laundry powder and dogs. They went back for the car. It was gone. The officer's dashcam caught something strange. When dispatch ran the pickup account through the rideshare portal, it returned "user deactivated" with a timestamp that didn't make sense, deactivated 2 hours before Patrick's app accepted the ride. "Latency," the deputy said. "Data caches do weird things." He was trying to be kind. Patrick nodded because he needed someone to sound sure. 3 weeks later, 2 more pings popped up on night shifts from the same road, at almost the same mile marker. Patrick declined. Another driver accepted. She texted the group chat at 3:11 a.m. "Arrived. No one here. Feels wrong." Then nothing else. Patrick sold his car within a month. The light upstairs. Rain remade the town that Sunday. gutters loud, driveways gleaming, roofs humming under the soft, persistent hammer of it. He had stayed inside all day, letting the noise cover the world. By 9:58 p.m., hunger pushed him out the door toward a drive-thru that still used paper receipts and called everyone boss. The round trip took 24 minutes. On the final turn back onto his street, he saw his house the way strangers see it, a small two-story with a narrow driveway and a single upstairs window lit like a stage. He braked halfway into the driveway. Lights off, he thought. I left them off. The rain drummed so hard it felt like static. He told himself the obvious lies. It was a reflection, a neighbor's porch throwing light strangely, a trick of angle on wet glass. He parked anyway, hurried inside with his paper bag, and only then felt the sick emptiness of knowing the lie didn't fit. Upstairs, all switches were down. The hallway was a tunnel. He walked the rooms and found them as he'd left them, the slow plant in the corner turning itself toward a light that wasn't there, the unmade bed, the closet he never used because the door sticks in humidity. He stood with a palm on the wall, feeling the thrum of the rain migrate through plaster. Whatever he'd seen outside could be explained. He decided to eat. Downstairs, the TV filled the room with blue light and human voices that meant nothing. He ate without tasting. He dozed with the fork still in the carton. 3 times he woke with the certainty that a pair of eyes had just slid away from his own. Each time, the corners of the room seemed to retreat from the light. After the third, he got up and turned on the hallway lamp. The dark didn't like to be cornered. It moved and made new corners. At the base of the stairs, he paused. The house exhaled with the change in air as the AC clicked off. Then an upstairs light went out, the crisp sound of a pull chain, followed by the gasp of a bulb cooling. He hadn't turned it on. He climbed, not because he was brave, but because there was no choice that let him stay where he was. At the top, the threshold of the bedroom lay flooded with a slice of dim light from the street. The carpet was damp with humidity. He said, "Hello," and hearing himself say it made him feel foolish and then terrified. He flipped the switch. The light came alive and traveled into the hallway in a clean rectangle. He stared at that rectangle as if it were a geometric proof that could give him relief. Then the closet door moved. Not a slam. Not even a full opening. Just the briefest intake, as if the door were a lung and the house had told it to breathe. He focused on the seam. Something in that black seam focused back. The door eased wider, the shape inside resolving into the outline of a face at the level of his own, features obscured by shadow, a smile forming not out of warmth but out of the need to appear harmless. He stepped back. The man stepped forward, hands open, voice patient. "Don't run," he said, as if they were discussing a bill at a restaurant. "You don't have to run." He ran. He took the stairs 2 at a time, slipped on the last step, recovered with the balance that terror gives. He was out the front door so fast the hinge made a sound he'd never heard from it, a bright metal cry. Rain slapped his face and got into his mouth. He dialed 911 and said his address first because he'd read that you should. While he waited, he watched his own front door and saw the man exit with a practiced quickness, turn right, and vanish into a rain that welcomed him as if it had been holding a place. Police found the back door splintered near the lock, wood flared out as if someone had driven a wedge and leaned their weight. In mud under the fence, 2 footprints double-stamped the same patch of earth, facing in and then out, as if the intruder had stood there deciding whether to leave and then decided twice. Nothing was missing. In the upstairs room, the bulb in the ceiling fixture was warm to the touch and flecked with tiny powdery dots, as though a wet finger had dabbed it in several places. The officer showed him the marks and shrugged. "Maybe he stood on the bed and played with your light," he said, trying to make a sick fact sound small. The prints on the back step pointed toward the same wooded tract at the edge of town where, for nights earlier, a rideshare driver had disappeared into trees and come out alone. 2 weeks later, a neighbor's doorbell camera captured the same man in a gray hoodie walking past at 2:43 a.m., the exact minute of the first knock on the townhome door, head down, bag strapped tight across his chest. The clip's metadata included a strange note, time corrected from device cache. The neighbor didn't know what that meant. Neither did the officer. The clip went into a folder called Overnight Disturbances. The man was never identified. At sunrise on a clear day not long after, the street looked innocent again. Lawns steamed. Kids waited with backpacks at the corner. Across 3 different houses, 3 different people paused and looked up for reasons they couldn't name. At a bedroom window, at a stand of trees, at a bus stop with cracked glass and a taped notice nobody could read. Later, each would describe the same sound though they were too far apart to have heard the same thing. A single voice, not pleading, calling out the way you do when you want someone to stop what they're doing and look up. There are explanations for everything if you're willing to sand off the corners. Bad GPS cache timestamps. Bulbs that hold heat in weird ways. People who do strange things for reasons that never reveal themselves. But sometimes the dates do not line up, and footprints point toward the same stand of trees, and a light upstairs goes on when the house is empty, and a knock on the door counts to 5 with your heartbeat. The case remains open. Which case depends on which part of the night you ask about.